It's Wednesday, November 1st, 2017 at 12 o'clock Eastern, or 12:15 Eastern Time, and this is Higher Ed Live Special Edition. I'm your host, Erin Sapinka, and on today's live broadcast, we're talking about incorporating text messaging into your existing communications plans. Higher Ed Special Edition is part of the Higher Ed Live network. Our episodes offer direct access to the best and brightest minds in education. Be part of our live broadcast by sharing your knowledge. Participate in today's discussion by tweeting us using Higher Ed Live. And also make sure to ask questions. We love when you pick our brains. All of our episodes are free and easy to access in the video archives at higheredlive.com, or you can take Higher Ed Live with you by subscribing to our podcast. Today's episode is made possible by Mongoose. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a digital-first agency committed to tailored solutions that drive real results. Are you looking to improve your institution's digital marketing strategy and execution? To be successful, today's higher ed marketer must make data-driven decisions and connect digital performance back to strategic and financial goals. Educate your entire team in the latest digital marketing strategies and trends on December 6th during M. Stoner's Digital Marketing for Higher Education online conference. We'll be tweeting out a link to learn more about the conference shortly. And now to our guest. Sorry I ran through that really fast. I wanted to get right into the nitty-gritty of it. Wes Sullivan is joining us. He is the Assistant Director of Undergraduate Admissions and Campus Experience at California Lutheran University in Thousand Oaks, California, which you actually have to qualify because my significant other went to California University of Pennsylvania. So
oh, wow. There you go.
Quite different location. And Mark Fox is joining us from Presbyterian College, where he is the Director of Admissions. First off, I want to thank you guys so much for joining me and hanging tough as we figured out our little audio mess up in the top of the hour. And with that, I'd like to jump right in, if that'd be okay with you both.
That sounds great. Glad to be here.
All right. So we are talking texting and admissions communication strategy. So when did you decide to incorporate text messaging into your marketing mix, and how did you arrive at that decision?
I guess I can start. We are pretty new to it, actually. We started in spring 2016 is when we started having conversations about it. I think we were realizing that we were missing a huge opportunity in how people communicate, especially how prospective students wanted to communicate with us. Not to mention probably most of our younger admission counseling staff wanted to communicate. So we started talking about it, and we're trying to look at vendors. The CRM we had at the time didn't really support it. And we were looking at a lot of options, many of which only had kind of broadcast out opportunities. So it wasn't really a conversation, more of us just screaming things out to people. But about a year ago, we much more seriously started the conversations and actually signed a contract and started the texting process and implemented in January of last year. So we actually started with kind of our admit population saying, hi, everyone, we're so excited to connect with you. And so we're just about to wrap up our very first year here at Cal Lutheran.
We were actually early adopters. We've been texting for it'll be 3 years in November now. And we were with our second vendor. And I would say the first time around, our focus was, this may give us a leg up. So let's get out in front of the competition. We certainly weren't too concerned about the CRM integration at the time. It was really just to meet students where they were and communicate with them in a different channel. And I will say we were much more transactional those first couple of years, but now with our new vendor, we've become a lot more conversational, and we're really seeing some benefits there at various levels.
Before we hopped on the call, Wes and I were actually chatting a little bit about kind of what you brought up in your answer a little bit earlier, Wes, is that it is a preferred mode of communications for not only prospective students, but some of your younger admissions counselors. So I'm already jumping off of our scheduled questions, but I'm interested, have you seen internally an adoption of this tool maybe a little bit more authentically than maybe doing the calling and the emailing? Is the texting kind of a good approach on both sides of the equation?
I certainly think so. I think we've seen our staff is a lot more responsive to texting than the traditional calling nights. We've certainly seen that. I think we've also seen them really really embrace the building the relationship and staying in touch with students, much like they do with their peers via text message, outside of the office. So yeah, on our side of the fence, it's really been beneficial tool for our staff as they recruit. And I think being that we have one 2017 grad and two 2016 grads on our admission staff right now, I would say texting is their preferred channel to communicate in, as well as our prospective students.
Yeah, and I would add, it's probably the same thing as Mark, but we really have found that, and I know when we started having the conversation, we were anxious about adding another platform. They already had phone calls, they already had emails. Do we want to add yet another way that they need to keep up with people? We were nervous about it, but I think those fears were quickly kind of put aside once we started using it, because it was just so natural. Most of our staff, we communicate with each other in text messages. So, it just became another way that we can communicate with people quickly. And it allows us really to get in touch with people right when they have a question, respond right away, and really kind of bring home, our kind of part of our brand promise is that we're a small institution where you get a lot of personal attention and we're there to help you. And so that's really allowed us to deliver a lot more than email and phone call. And I think we also had the conversation when we started too. This is text messaging. People expect an immediate response. And so we, as a team, committed to responding within an hour at most whenever we got text messages during business hours. It's not an expectation that our staff respond after hours, but most of them do. It's just so natural. It like pops up on your phone. You're like, okay, great. I can write back to this. I know the answer. I can get back to the student tonight, and I don't have to worry about doing it first thing tomorrow morning. So I think it's been really, really helpful for us. And I think our team really appreciated it. Kind of like what Mark was saying, just building those really authentic relationships with students and being able to keep in touch with them quickly where they are.
Yes, we were talking a little bit before the call of just how when we have the opportunity to opt in to text, whether it's IT or a billing service or something, we typically do. And so it's very interesting. And I once read a very interesting article about millennials' work styles and how instead of a work-life balance, we're seeing more of a work-life blend. And so with the addition of texting as a marketing and communications tool for brands and schools and institutions, it makes a lot of sense that we respond quickly and easily, because if I'm on the treadmill and my best friend texts me, I respond. If I'm on the treadmill and my boss emails me, it's not a big difference between those two. It might be a different stress or area of my life, but it's really easy and increasingly just normal to engage in that way, which I think is really fascinating as we move forward into newer and crazier ways to communicate with one another. So for each of you, what are some scenarios that you're seeing text messaging used the most for? Application reminders, deadlines, those one-on-one conversations that do create authentic experiences. Where do you see kind of text messaging shining and showing up the most?
I think there's always a conversation about, where does it slot in the communication plan. And I think what's really been fascinating to me is to see how much more efficient and productive our phone calls are now that we schedule via text message, particularly yielding phone calls that discuss financial aid or particular matters in the spring. We schedule those via text message, and the families are prepared when we make those calls because we reached out and confirmed them first. But we also are finding a time that's convenient for both parties. So I think on top of just the transactional items, that stands out to me as a way really to make phone calling much more efficient and minimize the time that your staff is sitting in the office making cold calls. So that jumps off the page to me when you ask that question.
Yeah, we've used it in a similar way with our admission yield calls in March and April. Instead of just having our students call kind of blindly, because we have students that make those phone calls to reach out. We found this year it was really helpful for us to send that text message out ahead of time saying, hey, we have students that would love to chat with you. How do you feel about that? Do you want to be in touch with them? And so many people wrote back excited about it, and it really, I think, helped our student staff as well, because when they were calling people, they were getting people that were excited to talk to them versus just kind of another person that's like, oh, this is awkward, how do I get them off the phone? So I think that has been really helpful, but I think our general strategy has been to be using texting more as a way for students to communicate with us than the other way around. So we really try and plan out all of our communication for the year, knowing that we're not going to send more than 5 to 10 text messages to a student, and really just trying to get in their phone as a contact. So when they have a question, they can reach out to us. We see the most value in it being there as a resource to them and not something that's just kind of annoying them and pouring in like all those emails that they just ignore. So we want to make sure we're using it responsibly and not overusing it to a point where people don't want to talk to us anymore.
Yeah, to just piggyback on what you said, Wes, we actually did something similar yesterday. So we basically sent an email out that said the college search may be spooky, but to our admissions counselor, text or call anytime. You know, trying to, again, push texting via another channel to encourage students to contact our staff and to get any questions or concerns answered.
I just have to laugh because I worked in the admissions office as an undergrad, and at springtime it was, you signed up for however many nights of 4 nights, and you got this whole list of names you would call. And I just remember like the number of people that were either at sporting events, so like we'd call between 5:30 and 7:30, and we'd catch some people getting back from like after school activities around 7:30, but more times than not, they were busy, they were out doing things. So we get the parent who's totally stoked, but maybe not the student, or we get students who are just kind of like, yeah, thanks. And so you get that one occasional person that was really excited. That made it all great, but those would come in so infrequently. And I can just imagine if I'd been able to text them or offer saying, hey, just let us know if you'd like us to call, or we can hook you up with someone to chat for a little bit after school hours or when it works best for your schedule and stuff like that. It would have been, I think, a better experience for both sides of that.
And we're even getting people texting back saying, can I text with you? Like text with a current student versus calling. And so we're looking into try and find ways that we can execute on that. Haven't quite gotten there yet, but I think that's probably our next step.
Yeah, I was actually curious to see if either of you had any success, because that's kind of the next level of how do you communicate with them, not giving out personal information while keeping it so that you're not handing over a bunch of prospective student text or cell phone numbers to current students to text whenever and however. And not that current students aren't great, but I do remember a couple of prospective students who really liked me for a long time. And when they came to school, they kept trying to meet up with me. And so that's something that I was curious about.
Yeah.
We do have a question from Twitter about Will Patch is curious about what services you've used and how they've integrated with any CRMs that you're using as well.
I guess I'll say that we currently are Mongoose users. We're also moving towards Slate here. We're doing our implementation, and the Slate and Mongoose, to our understanding, at least play nice. So we're looking forward to being able to import Mongoose data into Slate.
I have a very similar answer. We are also Mongoose clients for our texting platform, and our CRM is Slate. We are a little bit further along in our implementation than Mark and his team are, and so we do have Mongoose and Slate fully integrated with each other. Slate updates Mongoose every night with all of our contact information, puts all the text numbers in there, and then Mongoose sends all of our previous day's communication back to Slate, and it shows up in there as interactions. So that's been a really powerful tool for us this year to really just kind of have 2 live databases that talk to each other. We don't have to worry about them getting out of sync. And then all of our staff can see any text communication we're having. So if a student texts us and then calls our front desk, they can see the interaction we've been having, or if they're meeting with another admission counselor, they can see that and have that context, which has been really helpful. And we don't have to do anything. It just kind of happens magically overnight.
Sounds like a dream.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Anything that's automated is wonderful. So just a quick reminder to our viewers that if you do have any questions, please feel free to send them along to us by using hashtag HigherEdLive. I'm checking our Twitter feed regularly, and we'd love to hear from you. So how did you go about collecting the numbers, the mobile phone numbers? I know that home phones are kind of a thing, slowly becoming a thing of the past. So people may only have mobile numbers to hand out now, but kind of in that transition phase we're in now, how are you getting students to opt in with their mobile phone number?
Well, I think it all starts with having to explicitly ask for mobile number, and being sure you designate that this is not it's not just phone, it's mobile, and so that's the first step. And then at the same time, you have to let them know why you want to text them, so they will opt in. You want to text them updates, reminders, and stay in touch, not just to blow their phones up with marketing, text blast, mass messages. So I think you have to be very intentional with what you put on your inquiry forms, in your applications, and anywhere a student can submit their information.
Yeah, we started slow last year, knowing that we wanted to implement texting. We added a question to our application asking for permission to text students, even though we didn't have a way to do it yet. So when we rolled around to January, when we started texting, we had a great list of students already. We made the conscious decision internally that we wanted this process to be an opt-in process versus an opt-out process. So we never put students into our platform until they've given us express permission to text them, which I think has been helpful to us because we don't get students that are unexpectedly getting our text messages. But I think what we've learned in the time since is just to ask everywhere. So we ask on our application, we ask on all of our inquiry forms, we ask on every event registration page, we ask on our at college fairs when we're talking to students. Our counselors in the office will ask students if they've opted into texting. So really, we just ask as many times as possible and have a process to opt them in once we get that permission, whether that's through our CRM, which are most of those areas, and that just happens automatically, which is really nice. But if it's more of conversational, we have a process internally to get that going, and have found a lot of success in just asking people if they want to get texting. And of course, we found that people are more likely to say yes the closer they are to depositing. So I mean, obviously at the prospect level, a lot of people still say yes, but it gets, as they apply, more people say yes. Once they've been admitted, even more people say yes. And then once they enroll, pretty much all of them by that point have opted into texting.
So kind of on the flip side of that, we talked a little bit about implementation with staff members. How did that process look with getting them to not necessarily opt in their cell phone numbers, but opt in to be a part of this program and to sign up? And how did you get staff? I know you said that it's been received pretty well, but kind of what did that process look like?
Yeah, with our current vendor, each staff member has their own independent account, and so it's not their personal number that they're using. And we're very fortunate that we actually have an app that's can be used on both Android and Apple devices, so where they can respond back and forth to students in the app, not using their own personal number. And so I think when it comes to getting staff to buy in, being able to have some boundaries between their personal and work life does create a little bit more, I guess, incentive for them to buy in. So that was one piece. And I do think that that for us, especially as everybody starts coming back off the road, I think it comes back down to training as well. I mean, we're going to have another training here in a couple of weeks to really empower our staff to own the texting platform and get to maximize what they can do with it, rather than us having a handful of people that kind of just send messages to start conversations on behalf of those other staff members. So that's how I guess if I had to answer your question, I would touch on those 2 points.
Yeah, I would say we started by getting buy-in before we signed a contract. I mean, we sat down our entire team and basically presented the opportunity, said what we could do, and wanted everyone to say, yes, this is something I can commit to. Yes, this is something I'm excited about. So once we had that, it was really easy. And our text numbers are also independent of our personal phone numbers. They're actually, they digitally enabled our campus landlines. So the phone numbers that are on our business cards are also our text numbers. So they can call or text us just like it's a normal phone, just like they're used to. So that's been really awesome for us. And I think another really powerful tool that we are able to take advantage of is in Mongoose specifically, they have an account caretaker option. So if someone's out of the office or can't respond to texts, we can assign someone to respond on their behalf. And so to the student, they're still getting their response. They think it's coming from their admission counselor. It may not always be. But when we have big test messages going out and we're hosting a huge event, and the person that should be responding is running that event, we can have someone step in and help them out, which has been really helpful. And it all happens behind the scenes. The student never knows the difference. So that's been really helpful to us as well when we're running into areas where we need a little extra support.
I like that, the caretaker option. That I wish I could do that with my email and my own phone number.
That'd be pretty nice.
A great feature. So with the implementation of texting, and I know, Wes, you mentioned earlier that you were that I think, as all people are when we take on a new tool or a new platform, a little hesitant about where does it pull resources from that we may not have available to us. Where is texting kind of replacing or taking over things that you had done previously? Are you sending less emails? Are you sending less paper mail? How does texting kind of alleviate maybe resources in other areas, in other platforms?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, for us, our biggest concern was how do we support this extra area? And we were pleasantly surprised to find that it actually, I think, made our lives easier. Even though we were adding a third option for someone to communicate with us, more people choose to text us. And that's eliminating a lot of back and forth emails that we have directly with students and phone calls. So if we can answer a question in 20 seconds via text message instead of 5 or 10 minutes on the phone, or a few minutes really thinking through an email and making sure it looks really nice and all of our spelling and everything's perfect. I think that the informality of texting really allows us to just respond quickly and get people what they need versus trying to make it sound really nice and fluff it up a bit. So it hasn't really changed our overall marketing communication plans as much beyond the fact that we've now incorporated it into that. We're still sending our general kind of marketing emails that we've been sending, our mail pieces we've been sending, but we've just incorporated text into that. And we've started to delineate what emails we send. So Slate, our CRM, gives us the functionality to really dive deeply into our applicant data. And we actually are starting to send different emails depending on if someone's opted into texting or not, because we're starting to try and drive opt-ins to text from our general marketing communication emails for students that haven't opted in yet. And since our database is live and up to date, we have the ability to do that. So it hasn't really reduced our overall communication, probably just changed it on our kind of the marketing side, but really has been most efficient on the personal interaction side.
Yeah, and I would piggyback and say that anecdotally, it cuts down on the emails and the voicemails that the counselors are having to respond to. So can I measure that? No, but I will say that text messaging is allowing them to get in touch with students or be in touch with students quicker to get those answers that they need, much like Wes said.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had a really cool opportunity. Last year, we had an event that was being hosted by one of our newer staff members, and she forgot to ask for their t-shirt size on the event registration and didn't figure that out until she was going to place the order on the day the order was due. And so we were actually able to text the students, and within 20 minutes had every single t-shirt size. It was insane. I've never seen people respond so fast. Both, hey, we're giving you a t-shirt and we're going to ask you by text message. So what probably would have taken us usually a couple of days by phone calls or emails or things like that, we got taken care of in 20 minutes and got the order placed, which was pretty awesome and a pretty powerful demonstration, I think, to our team of what texting can do for us, even if it is something as silly as what's your t-shirt size.
Yeah, and I guess, Wes, to again, you said the word there, demonstrated. I think text messaging is another way to measure demonstrated interest. If a student opts in, obviously that's one step, but two, if they're engaging with you, that's, I don't know if it's more than a campus visit or if it's more than them engaging with you via email, but it certainly is a way that they're demonstrating that they're interested in you to a different degree than just submitting documents or just going through your regular process.
Speaking of kind of measurement, I know that you both have it hooked up to Slate, but is there any interesting data that you are collecting from the text messaging right now? Or are you still kind of, I know Wes, you've had it set up for a year, and Mark, you've had it for about 3 years. Is there data points that you're keeping track of regularly? And if so, what are they and what are they telling you?
I can say from our perspective, it's so new to us that I think we're still trying to figure it out. I mean, we certainly are wanting to track it. We have so much data at our fingertips that it's really nice. I mean, like I said before, like we're like seeing about 6% of our prospects are opting in, 70% of our applicants, and then about 84% of our deposits we communicated with by texting. So I mean, I think we can see a really powerful correlation. I mean, obviously, it also just kind of makes sense. Like the further they get in the process, the more likely they are. But we're seeing we can export the data on the number of times they send us a text message. And so I think that's a data point to me that's really interesting, and something that now we can integrate that into Slate. I want to find a way to take advantage of, because we had students last year that sent us upwards of 50 text messages over just from January to May. And so I think that certainly, like Mark was saying, is a demonstrated interest in our campus. They are obviously very engaged with us. And so I would love to find a way to leverage. I mean, I know within Slate they have prospect scoring, so we can assign points to different interactions that we have with them. So I would love to find a way to include texting in that, along with other things such as the campus visit, phone calls, emails, all of the traditional stuff. But I think we have some pretty powerful data in there. We also have, if you're looking at kind of from an aggregate data area, Mongoose specifically has a campaigns feature, which allows you to track the effectiveness of a particular text message. So you can actually see in real time how many people it went to, how many people responded, how long it took them to respond. And so you can really use that in a pretty powerful way to figure out what types of messages best engage students, and see it in real time. So you don't have to dig through spreadsheets to figure it out. It's all just kind of put together for you. So I think those are some things that come to mind for me. I mean, hopefully in a year I'll have a much better answer for you once we've had a chance to really kind of dig in and understand it.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a much better answer than you had there, Wes. I think it's a lot like everything else in our field. We have so much information, and the people that can dig through it and interpret it are the really valuable pieces. But we've been really fortunate. The Mongoose crew has taken good care of us, and really been able to splice some of the data for us and help us really see where we're making an impact, where maybe we need to focus a little bit more attention. So I know that the campaigns feature is great. We've used that a few times here in our office since they introduced that. But yeah, the data feature that Mongoose is offering now, and I know that's a priority for them going forward. I'm excited about it.
I'm a big data nerd, so I always have to slip in a question about how data is weighing in on things. I mean, it's creepy, but also fascinating, the amount of information and data points we can collect from our digital communications. And so it's always interesting to see how we're using them to make decisions. Another question from Twitter, and actually from a fellow RIT alum, I think I actually had classes with her, but advice on crafting a message on this platform. So, I mean, we've talked about authenticity and being true and kind of upfront about how we're going to be using it. How do you use the platform to send a message? What's the decision behind voice and tone and approach in that way?
I think we always want it to sound like a conversation. Our internal litmus test is, does this sound like a robot? We don't want it to sound like a bot. We want it to sound like a real human sent the message. So we really try and do that. And I think another thing that we often consider is this a message we want a student to reply to, or is it one we do not? And so we often craft our message differently depending on what we're hoping for. I know best practices that were suggested to us were to ask a question. So we use it a lot for completion. So often we'll send a student a text message saying, hey, John, we're missing your transcript. That's all we need to complete your application. And at first we didn't really think about it, but we started adding, do you plan to submit it? And the engagement shoots through the roof when you ask a question because people want to respond. So I think a lot of times we'll sit through and craft messages. Like we have a general counts or intro message that we're just trying to get our number into their phone with. And we don't ask a question because we don't necessarily need them to respond. We just want them to know we're there. So I think it really depends on the message. But overall, we want to make sure we sound like a human and a person that they can talk to, not a computer.
Yeah, to piggyback, I would say that the question at the end is certainly one of the most important things, and you have to call them to act, and that's something we've been really intentional about to hopefully drive that response and that conversation. We always want to make sure we're directing it to the actual person, and so it doesn't have that mass text feel and look.
I think, I mean, across all the platforms, voice and tone is extremely important. And this is kind of a little bit of tangent off of that question, but do you have any sort of style guide? Or I know we talked about helping your staff set up boundaries and kind of rules on knowing that they don't have to respond 24/7, stuff like that. But is there like a quick start guide that you send them to help them with branding, messaging potentially, or guides to what to say, what not to say, when to say it, how to say it? Or is it kind of, I guess, do you have a guide or training, or how does that look for you guys?
Yeah, we don't have a formal guide. I would say in our training we do cover it. We like to use our barometer is we ask our staff to be positive and professional, but we don't eliminate their ability to use emojis and exclamation points. So again, the main piece is connecting, and there's certain topics that are much better had, like going through the various levels of a financial aid award. That's a much better phone conversation than texting. So we've really focused on what messages are better to have via other channels, and try to make sure our staff are able to know when to use texting to drive to one of those other channels.
Yeah, I'd say ours is pretty similar. I mean, we have an annual meeting with our marketing team where we do our general kind of brand overview across all channels. So not something specific to texting. But I know when we did launch it, we wanted people to have fun with it. It's a fun platform. It's less formal. Like Mark said, we let them use emojis. They can do whatever they want. I mean, we want them to form an authentic relationship and to really enjoy using it. Like if they don't have fun with it, it just becomes another thing that they have to do. And I think people like going into Mongoose and texting back to people just because they can throw that emoji in there. They can ask them questions. And I'd say Mark kind of hit it on the head. Like some things you can chat about really easily. Other things, sometimes we have to say, hey, that's a great question, but can you give me a call? And I think the great news for us is that they just hit call. Like it's the same phone number, so we don't have to like send them a number or anything. And then we can have a more in-depth conversation when it dives into those topic areas.
Very streamlined, which I, again, appreciate. So switching gears a little bit, we've talked about prospective students, but in admissions, we always have to talk about parents. How is this service being adopted? Is by parents, if you have it set up for parents at all? How are parents responding to this text messaging addition to communication plans? Because I feel like when we get the postcards in the mail or sometimes email and stuff like that, they can see that more easily. But when it's a text message to their child's phone, they may not be as in the conversation as they like to be otherwise. Very loosely way to explain helicopter parents.
I think it's a really good question. I mean, we have run into quite a few times texting the student to their parent's phone, and we'll go, hey, this is so-and-so's parent. Here's their number. I think overall, parents are just really impressed that we offer it as an option. A lot of times when I've talked to students with their parents, when they find out the student can text us, they're like, oh, that's great, because I think my student will actually talk to you. I don't have to call you. I don't have to email you. My student's comfortable with texting. They'll use it. And I think we've noticed that a lot. Like, I feel like we have a lot more in-depth contact with students than we've ever had because they're comfortable with the medium. They too feel like it's more informal and they can ask questions and be vulnerable. They don't have to be on the phone with their parent right behind them telling them what to say. And so whether their parent's there or not, I think kind of that delay that they have in texting to be able to talk to a parent and ask questions and go back and forth has been really helpful. But I think we're trying to wrap our heads around your very question. How do we adapt texting toward parents directly in a more intentional way? Right now, we don't have a great way to do that. We're trying to figure it out because I think there'd be a lot of value there where we could send. I feel like with parents, it may be more of us sending them messages than the reverse. Like if we wanted to prompt them to help their student with something. But I know there are a lot of parents that want to text us, and we have some students that their number switches back and forth all the time because their parent keeps trying to jump in there and take over the conversation. So I think we need to find a much better way to do it. But I think overall parents are appreciative of the offering. And one of my concerns when we jumped in is like, are parents going to be comfortable with us texting their kids? And I think they are. I mean, we can monitor every conversation that goes on in the platform. We can see what people are saying. And if there were ever a situation where there was any concern, the data is stored and we have it. And our team doesn't have the ability to go in and delete it. So I think having that platform there really helps in that area. Like we don't have to worry as much about that and can monitor what's going on.
Yeah, I think Wes gave a great answer. I don't have too much to add to that, but I will say that when the parents are when we do happen upon a parent and they're texting back and forth with us, I would say the parents engage at a similar rate if their numbers in the system as the students do. So I think they enjoy the platform and the texting capabilities that we offer as well.
So no group text messaging yet with parents and students. I can just imagine that someday with like my family would all be in the same group text message with an admissions counselor weighing in their own input and feedback and questions. And so it would be an interesting development. We are coming towards the end of our show, and so I want to prompt the audience that's tuning in with us one last time. If there are any questions, please send them along. And one last question while we wait to see if there are any that come in. What's kind of on the horizon for you guys? What's the next cool thing that you're looking at doing with texting? Is there something you're excited about with this admission season? Early decision right around the corner, regular decision also right around the corner. Is there anything exciting and new that you're trying out with the texting platform that we can maybe check back in on next cycle to see how it turned out?
I would say, some things on the horizon. We've really been trying to incorporate texting in events, and some of in our event, confirmations and details before, as in like where to park on campus. So we've really been using it that way. I also deliver surveys after events and visits. And I would say, something that we're really trying to think about here in-house is how can we use texting to improve other processes? Because it is a tool and it is helping us already do some of these, improve some of these areas. So that's really something strategically we're starting to really think about is how can texting, help us reach students here, or here with this subject, or for that matter.
Yeah, I think Mark, you got it. We've had a lot of similar conversations. I mean, we started in kind of a weird place because we started mid-cycle with students once they were admitted. So I think kind of our initial foray into texting was looking at how we use it for events. So for us right now, it's figuring out how to use it earlier on at the prospect stage, on the applicant stage, and the completion stage. So we're really trying to figure out those areas. But we have had a lot of success using Google Map pins for our event check-in locations. So we schedule text messages during our events to go out about a half hour before the event starts to each student saying, we're so excited you're going to be here on campus today. Here's a link to exactly where you need to go for check-in. And if they can click on it, it'll just open up the GPS on their phone and take them right there. So that's really helped us a lot, especially when we have check-in kind of in the middle of our campus or in somewhere that's a little bit harder to find. I think for us, probably the next iteration of that is we have a visit system that's independent of our CRM that we built out internally in-house. And so trying to find a way to link texting into that and be able to send out a text to our daily visitors that are coming to campus saying kind of the same thing. We're excited you're coming. Here's exactly where you need to go. Let us know if you have any questions or problem finding us. But I think using it during events has been helpful. We've also found a lot of great use cases like our giant admitted student day event. We always know when lunch opens, there's a huge crush for us because everyone wants food right when it's available, even though it's available for 2 hours. And so this year we tried something new, which is actually worked really well. Is right when lunch opened, we scheduled a text to go out talking about another event that was happening and directing people to go there. And it did deflect a pretty good number of people. So thinking about how we can use it during events for kind of more general announcements when we have more people we can talk to efficiently, I think would be an exciting thing for us to try this year as well.
I love the GPS thing. That would be so useful for our college campus where we don't have a physical address that actually takes them to like a spot on campus. I love that. I'm going to steal that for like even just regular stuff.
Yeah, definitely do it. It's super helpful and so easy to do.
And then we actually do have a great question from Morgan on Twitter, who was curious about auto responses during holidays or when the college is closed. So do you guys do a sign off and say, hey, we'll be in touch after the break? Or is there something that, again, those caretakers, how does that work for holiday college campus closed times?
I'm going to be completely honest. I don't have a great answer for that one. I tend to let work spill over into my personal life probably a little too much. So yeah, just for a quick text message, I have no problem responding maybe a little after hours or maybe over a holiday break, particularly if we're trying to complete an application or if it's an accepted student with an urgent question, like I haven't received my notification yet, and you said it was supposed to come on December 15th. So yeah, I don't have a great way to answer that as far as our staff. We certainly don't require our staff to respond over that time, and I certainly don't assume the caretaker role for all of them. But that's something I'm certainly going to put on our radar to talk through and try to have a plan for as we roll into the holiday season this coming year. I'm interested in what you guys do at Cal Lutheran, Wes.
I'm going to say thank you for bringing up that question because I had not even thought about it. We haven't hit that part in our year yet. I mean, we started using it in January right after the holiday last year. I mean, I think probably Christmas, New Year, that is probably the one time a year where we are all out of the office for a week or two. So that definitely has put an item on my to-do list to figure that out. Because I think with texting, we don't have the ability to send it out of office like you do with email or voicemail. So that definitely does present an interesting challenge. I will say anecdotally, though, students and parents are really understanding when we don't respond outside of office hours. I think they just have kind of a general understanding that if they're texting us late at night on a weekend, that they may not hear back from us right away. I mean, oftentimes I think our staff will respond if it's an easy question or something that's urgent. Like Mark was saying, like completing an app or getting back to someone that's anxious about a decision. But yeah, I think that's a good question, something we definitely need to think about and what we want to do. Because I mean, I don't know that we'd want to go as far as sending out a blast to everyone like, hey, have a great Christmas and New Year's. We're off until the 2nd. But maybe just having a conversation with our staff to say, hey, like I know most of you have this on your phone. Feel free to ignore ones that aren't urgent, but if there is something urgent, let's try and respond. I don't know. I think we need to dive into that a little bit more.
It's definitely an interesting question because our applications are due right as the college is opening back up after winter break. And so that's been interesting each year because I think usually always extend the deadline by a couple of days just because of the way the it's just easier because we do get a lot of questions that maybe didn't get noticed right away or took a minute to answer. And so instead of causing stress on both sides, we just push the deadline a little bit. But you guys will have to report back to us on what you guys end up doing. But that's all the time I have for today. And so first off, I just want to thank you guys, Mark and Wes, for joining me today. And as always, thank you to our program sponsors, Mongoose and Stoner. And finally, thanks to our viewers for tuning in for another Higher Ed Live episode with me. This is Erin Spinka signing off. We'll see you next time. Oh, I know, my next is coming.